In the midst of a political campaign season that's heating up, I'm finding that Americans are hungry for a different and distinct civic message today. So today, the civic message we need. Hi, I'm Rich Harwood, and welcome to another edition of Harwood Half Hour. It's great to have you with us. I'm coming live, as I like to say, every couple of weeks from our studios in downtown Bethesda. Shoot me a message to let me know that you can hear me and where you're coming in from today. And here's a question I'd like you to think about this afternoon as we go through this today. What are you looking for in a new message to help communities and our nation feel like we're moving forward? What kind of message are you looking for today? You know, usually in these Harwood half hours, I lay out a situation that we're facing and then talk about 3 points, 3 steps, 3 things you can do to take action to move things forward. And I love doing those, and I'll continue to do those as we move forward. But for the next few minutes today, I'd like to take a slightly different approach. You know, I've been traveling around the country on my speaking tour, which is a warm-up in a sense for a new book I have coming out in October called Stepping Forward, a Positive Practical Path to Transform Our Communities and Our Lives. And in this speaking tour so far, I've been to Oak Park, Illinois, which is outside Chicago. I've been to Rockford, Illinois. I've been to Montana. I'm heading up to over to Des Moines in a few weeks. And then I'll continue to speak all the way through until October when we actually release this book, and then continue the speaking tour for a couple more years. But so far, I want to reflect today on what I've been hearing and what it leads me to think and what I believe we need to do moving forward. So today, not 3 points, not 3 steps, not 3 actions you can take, but some reflections on what I'm hearing across the country and what I make of it and what I think we need as a civic message moving forward. You know, one of the things is let's face reality as we're looking ahead to this campaign season. I, for one, don't believe that the change we need is likely to come anytime soon from Washington, D.C. or many of our state capitals. Nor do I believe that the change we need is likely to come if we simply elect another batch of officials, another batch of politicians who insist on pursuing a path of acrimony and divisiveness, of a polarized politics. It seems to me that simply replacing one set of politicians with another, as important as that may be to you or to others who are listening in, as important as that may be, that's not going to create the kind of change that I hear Americans want across our country. I happen to think that if we're going to create the change that we need, the change that we aspire to, that those of us in communities are going to have to step forward and create the kinds of communities, the kinds of country that we want moving forward. It's going to take those of us in our local communities doing this. And here's why. You know, as I travel, what I hear are people are increasingly discouraged and dispirited by what's happening across the country. Their hope is waning. Our sense of faith in one another is being undermined. And frankly, in the last 30 years that I've been doing this work, the sense of discontent that I'm encountering in communities as I travel across the country has never been as wide or as deep as I'm hearing, as I'm feeling, as I'm experiencing as I talk to folks. But there is good news. There is good news. And it's this, that people are responding to a distinct and different civic message. While they may not be responding to a political message, and in fact, many of the political messages that are being sounded, the bases of our different political parties are asking our politicians to increasingly be more polarized, to be acrimonious, to be divisive, because our politics is such. But that in the midst of these political messages that we find so tiring and dispiriting and discouraging, there is a civic message that can break through, and that is breaking through as I'm traveling across the country. And that's what I think we need to be focused on. And I think the civic message is so important because the work that we need to do has to begin in our local communities, because it's there that we can actually come together and do work together. It's there that we actually can come together and forge the types of relationships that we need. It's in our local communities that we can actually rebuild the trust that we need, and we can rekindle the civic confidence that we so desire. And it's because it's in our local communities where we live together, where we work together, where we can meet up and do this kind of work. And it seems to me that if we can begin to create this kind of change in our local communities, it can spread from there. New norms can spread from there. New civic confidence can grow from there. New levels of trust can form the foundation we need to take action on larger national issues that are befuddling us at the moment, and in which we can't seem to make any progress. And it seems to me that if we can begin to take action in our local communities, that new norms can begin to form and take root and grow and spread from there. Norms of what it means to re-engage with one another, what it means to exercise greater compassion towards one another, what it means to listen to one another, what it means to work together to one another, with one another. And it seems to me that this is what we need to begin in our local communities. And it's in our local communities where this can actually happen. Given what's going on in our country, we've got to seize this opening in our local communities. And then it seems to me that our politicians will follow us. You know, throughout American history, this has happened where change has begun in our local communities, and then our politicians begin to step forward and follow us. And it seems to me that it's our turn again, that this is where we are once again. But look, people are really hunkered down right now. They're pulling back from one another. We're closing ourselves off from one another. We're losing a sense of possibility about what we're capable of in this country. And so the civic message that I'm finding that breaks through is a civic message that literally calls each of us back into community, that calls us back to rediscovering what we share in common, and calls us back to actively build on what we do share in common. And remember, this may sound nice, but it's so different from what's happening in our politics today. Our politics is actually asking us to divide ourselves from one another, to pick up teams and just play on those teams, to cast aspersions at one another, to question one another's motivations, those who serve on the other team, who are part of another political party, or who have different political, small p, large p political positions. And what I'm suggesting is something quite opposite from that, something radically different from that. And that is that instead of calling us to sort of pick up arms against one another and divide ourselves against one another and to be acrimonious toward one another and to polarize ourselves against one another and to think that just our side is right and the other side is wrong, what I'm suggesting is a civic message that actively calls us back into community life, to come together and to rediscover those things that we do share in common. I know there are real differences between and among us, and they are real. But there are things that we do share in common. There are common aspirations we have for our communities and for our lives and for our neighbors that I think we need to rediscover. We need to articulate again. We need to commit ourselves to. We need to then actively find ways to build upon those shared aspirations to take action together. We're never going to agree on everything, but I think our task is to rediscover those things that we do share in common, that we do agree on, and to find ways to actively build upon those. So that's number one. The second thing is, I think we need to help people see the progress that we are making in our communities. And we've got to do this. We're going to have to make it visible. You know, there are a lot of good things happening in so many communities. I know this from our own work, whether it's in Eastern Kentucky or Mississippi or in lots of communities across California where we're working with local libraries, or across Indiana where we're working with United Ways and other groups. There are so many good things happening in so many of our communities, except those of us who are involved in this change often don't even recognize the change we're creating. And those of us surely who aren't involved in this change, well, we're continuing to get these messages from our politicians and from other national leaders and from the news media that we're too divided to come together, that we're so polarized that we can't make any progress, that we need to pick up sides, as I said before, and just battle one another. And so if we're going to make progress, part of the civic message that I'm finding is breaking through, and that I believe we need to sound more in our communities and across the country, is that we've got to identify those places where we're making progress, and we've got to make them more visible to one another. You know, here at the Harwood Institute, we recently developed and released a new tool that we call Making the Invisible Visible. And what it is a set of questions you can write to us. We'll send it to you. We're still testing it in communities across the country. But it's a tool that is a set of questions that enables people to recognize the progress they're making and to share it with others so that others can see that progress as well. And so I believe this is one of the things we need to do. And it's part of the civic message, I believe, that you and I and others need to sound. And then the last part, the third part of this civic message, is that I believe we need to lift up a new can-do spirit, a new can-do narrative in our communities, made up of the progress, the examples of progress that we're making in our communities. These narratives, so much of our narrative today is negative. So much of it tells us what we can't do. So much of it tells us how much in disagreement we are about things. And it seems to me we need to claim and lift up a new can-do spirit, not pushed out by some public relations firm, not sort of crafted by some political campaign out of focus groups, but a can-do spirit and narrative that emerges out of our community, that's based on the progress that we're actually making by coming together, by building on those things that we share in common and then working towards them together. And so I think we need to do that. So those of us in our local communities with this new civic message, we can be the difference that our communities in this country need to move forward. It seems to me that the change that we're hungering for, this new civic message that we're so hungry for, we're the ones who are going to have to create it. We're the ones who are going to have to make it real. We're the ones who are going to have to do it in our local communities and then spread it from there across our country. Now, some people will say, well, where in God's name did you get this from? And why is it that you believe it? So let me just say a word about that. I don't believe this because I read it in a book. I don't believe what I'm saying because I adhere to some philosophy. I don't believe it because somehow someone told me I should believe it. I believe it because I look at American history and I see it. Throughout American history, we have come together to create the change that we need. Look, just remember that this country was founded by a ragtag group of folks. They didn't have any uniforms. They didn't have a switchboard. They didn't have faxes, or they didn't have some office space somewhere. It was a ragtag group across our colonies who decided to fight against King George and found our country, right? The American Revolution started in our local communities and grew from there. We decided in the 1800s to come together and abolish slavery. That started, the abolition movement did not start in Washington, D.C. It started in our local communities and grew from there. Women's suffrage, child welfare laws, voting rights, civil rights, all these things, they all began by people coming together in communities and deciding that we needed a change of direction in American history and the trajectory of our country moving forward. And we then coupled that with leaders on our national level who believed that we needed to take a different direction. So it started from the bottom up, and it met leaders from nationally, and they met together and created change in our country. This is how we were founded. It's how we abolished slavery. It's how we've made progress throughout our communities all across this country as well. And so I believe that we can create change right now because our history tells us that we've done it so many times before. And I believe that so many of the things that we need to work on, I know that there are stains on our national fabric that we need to deal with. And we've been doing that since the founding of the country. And I believe we are called to do it again today. Our work is not finished in our country. It seems to me that we can do better, we can be better, and we need to figure out ways to call ourselves forward and make this change happen. We face a fundamental choice right now. We can succumb to the messages that we're hearing of disappointment and discontent and despair, or we can step forward and create the kind of country that reflects the best in us and the best of us. And I know as I'm traveling the country and people are hearing this new civic message, that people want to step forward. They want to come together and create the kind of country that reflects the best in us and the best of us, and that reflects the things that we aspire to. And so, we Americans, we're problem solvers, we're doers, we're innovators. And it's time again that we step forward and create the kind of community and the kind of country that reflects the best of us. So here's my hope for you. My hope for you today is that you will step forward with a sense of courage and humility to help yourself and to help ourselves in our communities, in your community, to rediscover what we share in common and to actively build upon it. That's my hope for you today. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of this again. If you want more information about the Harwood Institute, please go to our website, theharwoodinstitute.org. If you're interested in this speaking tour that I'm undertaking, please give us a call at the Harwood Institute, and we'd love to talk to you. And in the meantime, just remember it's our 30th anniversary this year. We've recommitted ourselves on this 30th anniversary to supporting the work that you do. Our work has spread to all 50 states in the US and has been pulled into about 40 countries worldwide. It's rooted in a philosophy of civic faith and in a practice of turning outward. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you, and we'd love to support the efforts that you're undertaking in your local communities. Tune in again to another Harwood Half Hour in 2 weeks on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, be well. Thanks so much.